The sleek black Mercedes Maybach rolled to a stop in front of the grandiose Rosecliff Hotel, its gold-plated name gleaming under the soft evening lights. The doorman didn't move. He glanced inside the vehicle, then turned away, pretending to be busy with his gloves. Inside the car, Elijah King, CEO of a Fortune 100 tech firm, noticed the subtle snub, but said nothing. He stepped out, his sharp navy suit tailored to perfection, his wristwatch worth more than the doorman's yearly salary. Elijah was used to the stares, the assumptions, the invisible walls, but tonight he was tired. He'd just flown in from Singapore, had landed contracts worth billions, and all he wanted was rest. His assistant had booked the penthouse suite days in advance. As he approached the front desk, the young receptionist, blonde and bored, didn't even lift her eyes. "We're full," she said flatly before he even spoke. Elijah raised an eyebrow. "Name's Elijah King. Reservation under King Tech." She frowned. "Right." One moment, after several taps, she forced a tight smile. "Yes, the penthouse. You're lucky." Her tone was thick with disbelief. Elijah nodded calmly, his voice even. "Room service, please. I need something hot and quick." She didn't even hide her eye roll. "Room service ended an hour ago. Maybe try a pizza place nearby." Before he could reply, a nearby bellhop whispered, "They served room service to the white couple on the 14th floor just 10 minutes ago." Elijah's jaw clenched, but he didn't raise his voice. Instead, he tapped his phone, whispered, "Activate internal review," and walked silently to the elevator. The room wasn't the only thing he'd be checking into tonight. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime, revealing the pristine marble hallway of the penthouse floor. Elijah stepped out, his expression unreadable. The concierge who normally escorted VIP guests was nowhere in sight. No welcome drink, no warm greeting, just silence. The message was loud and clear: he wasn't wanted. But Elijah King wasn't just a guest tonight. He was the unseen hand behind Rosecliff's new ownership. Just 3 weeks ago, King Tech's real estate branch had acquired a controlling stake in the hotel chain as part of a quiet expansion into luxury hospitality. No press releases, no announcements. He wanted to experience his investment firsthand, anonymously. And now, he had experienced it. Inside the penthouse, the city skyline glimmered through floor-to-ceiling windows. Elijah loosened his tie, walked over to the minibar, and poured himself a glass of scotch. He didn't drink often, but tonight warranted it. He sipped slowly, his mind replaying every disrespectful moment: the doorman's dismissal, the receptionist's snide tone, the lie about room service. He opened his laptop, fingers moving fast. A live camera feed of the hotel's main lobby blinked onto the screen, a new feature he'd personally insisted on installing in every property. He watched the front desk staff laugh and joke, completely unaware that the man they tried to ignore was the very reason they were employed. He clicked open another window. A secure conference call was already set up with HR, legal, and operations. With a few keystrokes, he scheduled it for 6 a.m. sharp. No mercy, no warnings. As the city buzzed outside, Elijah leaned back in the chair, a calm storm behind his eyes. They thought he was just another black man with money. By morning, they'd learn exactly who Elijah King really was. At exactly 6 a.m., the hotel's management team was jolted awake by urgent messages marked priority, CEO directive. Phones rang, emails pinged. Panic rippled through the hierarchy. None of them had any idea the man in the penthouse suite was the Elijah King, the majority shareholder of Rosecliff International. Downstairs, General Manager Philip Brewster was already sweating bullets in his office, pacing like a trapped animal. He'd reviewed the security footage after receiving the internal audit request from corporate, his hands trembling as he recognized Elijah's face. Not just a guest, the guest. And they had failed, miserably. By 6:30 a.m., every department head had been ordered to report to the hotel's executive conference room. No excuses. Elijah arrived precisely on time, clean-cut, fresh suit, and a calm aura that unnerved the entire room. He didn't shout, he didn't curse, he didn't need to. He tapped the projector remote, and up came clips from the night before. The doorman ignoring him, the receptionist's dismissive attitude, the blatant lie about room service, and the white couple being cheerfully served after hours. The silence in the room was suffocating. "Explain," Elijah said simply. Philip cleared his throat. "Mr. King, I deeply apologize. Had we known—" Elijah raised a hand. "That's the problem. You needed to know who I was to treat me with basic respect?" Nobody spoke. He turned toward the HR director. I want the names of every employee on the schedule from 5 p.m. to midnight last night. Effective immediately. They are terminated. Gasps erupted. One woman began to cry. Elijah didn't flinch. Disrespect is expensive, he said coldly. And in my hotels it costs people their jobs. He stood, buttoned his jacket and walked out, leaving behind silence and stunned faces. By 8 a.m., word of the sudden mass termination had already begun leaking through staff group chats and local gossip blogs. Someone had recognized Elijah King in the lobby and tweeted a blurry photo with the caption, "Did Elijah King just fire half the Rosecliff staff? #CEO in the building." It went viral within an hour. Inside the hotel, chaos brewed beneath the polished surface. Guests whispered in elevators. Employees walked on eggshells. A few senior staff tried to salvage face by issuing weak apologies and half-hearted explanations to anyone who asked, but it was too late. The damage was done. Elijah sat calmly at the penthouse breakfast table, scrolling through his phone. The headlines were already forming. Black billionaire CEO exposes hotel racism. Acts immediately, room service denied to CEO. Staff fired same night his assistant Zara called in from New York. "It's blowing up, sir. We're getting requests for interviews. CNN, Forbes, even the Breakfast Club." "I'm not interested in press," Elijah replied, sipping his espresso. "Not yet." Zara hesitated. "Sir, do we issue a public statement or deny involvement?" He looked out at the skyline, his voice steady. "No denial. Just the facts. Release the security footage. Let the world see what respect looks like, when it's missing and when it's enforced." Zara chuckled softly. "You know, sir, you just became the face of quiet power." Elijah smirked. "Good. They need to learn. Not every billionaire wears loafers and smiles for the camera." Back downstairs, reporters were beginning to gather outside. Rosecliff's PR manager was frantically drafting damage control statements. But none of it mattered now. The story wasn't about a hotel scandal. It was about a man who refused to be silent and made sure the world couldn't ignore him. Across the city, Rosecliff International's corporate headquarters was in full meltdown. Executives stormed into an emergency boardroom meeting, faces pale, voices sharp. No one had expected Elijah King to act so publicly, so decisively, firing an entire shift of staff overnight, releasing footage, refusing to soften the blow. But the numbers didn't lie. Stock prices had jumped 4% since morning. Social media sentiment was overwhelmingly in Elijah's favor. Thousands praised his swift action against discrimination. Public trust in the Rosecliff brand, oddly enough, was rising, not falling. "People are calling it CEO justice," one marketing exec said, scanning live reactions. "Some guests are actually booking rooms just because of Elijah's stance." Another chimed in, "We've never had this kind of public backing." They're calling it bold, honest, long overdue. But not everyone was thrilled. The chairman of the board, Harold Whitman, a balding traditionalist who once told Elijah he should smile more in meetings, looked furious. "He's turning this company into a circus," Whitman snapped. "We have policies, HR procedures. You don't just fire people on a whim." Elijah's face appeared on the screen via live feed. He'd dialed into the meeting without warning. "Morning, gentlemen," he said, his voice calm but firm. "Let me remind you, I own 51% of this circus." Silence. "And I don't make decisions on a whim. I make them when your policies fail." Whitman tried to cut in. "Elijah, you can't just—" "I already did." He leaned forward, face closer to the camera. "If we want to be a luxury brand, we can't afford to tolerate third-rate behavior. Not from employees, not from executives. Fix your hiring practices, train your staff, or step aside." Then he ended the call, and the boardroom stayed silent. Down in the staff lounge, the aftermath was hitting hard. Some cried quietly. Others sat frozen, eyes on their phones, scrolling through news headlines that now featured their workplace and their mistakes. Madison, the young receptionist who had denied Elijah room service, stared blankly at the screen. Her face wasn't in the leaked footage, but her voice was. Her snark, her lie. She never imagined that the man she dismissed as just another guest would be her ultimate downfall. He looked like, I don't know. Not like a CEO, she whispered to her friend Amber, who was also terminated. He didn't act powerful, Amber shot back. He didn't have to, that's the point. Upstairs, Elijah reviewed a different list, names of the remaining staff who had shown professionalism that night. A quiet bellhop named Samuel caught his attention. It was Samuel who had discreetly tipped him off about the couple getting room service. Samuel had done it with respect, not pity. That mattered. Elijah picked up the phone. Promote Samuel to floor supervisor, effective immediately. Triple his pay, Zara replied. Done. He's trending online too. Someone posted a photo of him bowing slightly as he walked away. Caption said, real recognize real. Elijah chuckled. Good. We reward integrity, not just titles. Meanwhile, other hotel branches under Rosecliff International had started quietly reviewing their own staff behavior. The ripple effect was undeniable. Internal emails titled King Protocol began circulating, mandatory diversity retraining, secret guest audits, anonymous staff evaluations. What started as one act of quiet retaliation was now rewriting corporate culture across the chain. Elijah knew he couldn't end racism in a day, but he could make it expensive. And that was a lesson everyone, from the doorman to the boardroom, would never forget. By the next day, Elijah King's name wasn't just trending, it was everywhere. News anchors praised his calm but assertive response. Business analysts debated his unconventional leadership style. Civil rights leaders applauded him. Even celebrities began chiming in, posting clips of the incident and calling Elijah a new kind of power. The footage had done more than expose bias. It had ignited conversation. The world wasn't just watching a hotel scandal, they were witnessing a shift in how power, race and respect were navigated in corporate America. Outside the Rosecliff lobby, reporters crowded in, hoping to catch a glimpse of Elijah. Cameras flashed when he finally emerged in a crisp black suit, sunglasses on, flanked by a single security officer. He didn't shout. He didn't hold a press conference. He simply handed a folded statement to a reporter and walked toward his car. The headline hit within minutes, Elijah King's statement, "Respect is not a luxury, it's a requirement." Inside the statement was more than a quote. Elijah had announced a company-wide initiative, the Respect Standard, a set of non-negotiable behavioral policies for all Rosecliff employees, from janitors to executives. Violations meant immediate termination, no more warnings, no second chances. He also pledged $5 million toward training hospitality staff across the country in unconscious bias and racial sensitivity. Critics called it performative, but actions spoke louder, and Elijah's were echoing across industries. In the backseat of his car, Elijah finally allowed himself a moment to breathe. He stared out the window as the city blurred past. Zara's voice came through his earpiece. "You've just changed the hospitality game." He gave a small smile. "Good. Now let's change the rules." Because for Elijah King, justice wasn't just a word, it was a business strategy. Samuel stood outside the staff elevator, still in his bellhop uniform, clutching the letter that had just changed his life. It wasn't a mistake. The seal was real. The signature? Elijah King himself. He had been promoted to floor supervisor, tripling his salary and gaining full benefits overnight. Staff passed by, offering stunned congratulations. Some of the very same people who used to ignore him now treated him like royalty. But Samuel wasn't one to gloat. He kept his head down and stayed humble. Elijah watched from the balcony above the lobby, his expression thoughtful. Samuel's integrity had cost him nothing, yet it had brought him everything. Later that afternoon, Elijah called him up. "I appreciate what you did. You didn't speak up for attention. You did it because it was right." Samuel nodded, nervous. "Thank you, sir. I couldn't stay quiet." "That's the kind of man I want running this place," Elijah said firmly. "You've got my trust. Earn the rest from the team." As they shook hands, a few guests looked on, whispering. In that moment, it wasn't just Samuel who'd been promoted. It was the very idea of character over color. While the world praised Elijah King's bold moves, not everyone behind the scenes was celebrating. In a sleek corner office at Rosecliff's Manhattan headquarters, board chairman Harold Whitman stared at the television with clenched fists. Every channel replayed the story. Every outlet framed Elijah as the revolutionary CEO changing corporate culture. Stockholders loved it. The public adored it. But Harold? He saw it as a threat. "Elijah's making this company about politics," Harold muttered, pacing. "We're supposed to be in hospitality, not headlines." But deep down, he wasn't angry about Elijah's decisions. He was angry about Elijah's power. Despite years in the company, Harold had never commanded the respect Elijah now held overnight. One quiet man had shown more leadership in 48 hours than Harold had in 20 years. He picked up his phone. "Call an emergency board session. We need to reevaluate Elijah's authority." But when the board convened later that evening, the tone had shifted. Several members, once loyal to Harold, praised Elijah's actions. "He's increased shareholder value, boosted public trust, and modernized our image," one director said. And frankly, it was overdue. Harold's face burned red. Then came the real blow. The board unanimously passed a new motion to officially appoint Elijah King as executive chairman, giving him final say on all operational and cultural decisions company-wide. Harold was now under his leadership, the very man he once suggested should stick to tech. As Elijah's name echoed through the room with applause, Harold sat back, defeated, watching the rise of a man he'd once dismissed. The message was clear. Elijah didn't just fire staff for disrespect, he was rewriting the entire company, and there was no room left for the old guard. Back at the hotel, Madison sat alone in her now empty apartment, the same one the hotel had once paid for as part of her employment package. Her phone was filled with unread messages, but none offered sympathy. Most were sharp reminders of what she'd said, and how many people had heard it. Clips of her voice were circulating online. One in particular had gone viral. "Room service ended an hour ago. Maybe try a pizza place nearby." Millions had heard the sneer in her tone. Millions had seen how quickly she'd dismissed a man she assumed was unimportant, a man who turned out to own the building she worked in and her future. Her friends had warned her to speak up, to apologize, but Madison was stubborn. She convinced herself it wasn't that bad, that it had been blown out of proportion, that Elijah King should have just let it go. But as the days passed, something else set in: silence. There was no outreach from the hotel, no media interviews to defend herself, no one asking her side of the story, because in the court of public opinion, the footage spoke for itself, and in the corporate world Elijah was now building, intent mattered less than impact. Meanwhile, Elijah never once mentioned Madison by name. He didn't drag her online, he didn't call for public shaming, he didn't need to. He simply let her actions echo back louder than any apology ever could. In his eyes, there was no point in demanding an apology from someone who only regrets being caught, not being wrong. And for Madison, that silence cut deeper than any headline. Because sometimes the worst punishment is being forgotten. 3 days after the storm, Elijah King released a letter, not to the press, not to the public, but to every single employee across all Rosecliff properties worldwide. Over 15,000 staff received it in their inbox at 8 a.m. sharp. It read, "To every member of the Rosecliff family, I was once told I didn't look like a CEO, that I was too quiet, too serious, too different. And last week, I was told, without words, that I didn't deserve room service. Let me be clear, this company will never again confuse someone's appearance with their worth. Not under my leadership." What happened at Rosecliff Midtown wasn't just about me, it was about a culture. One that had been allowed to whisper disrespect into polished smiles and hide bias behind policy. That culture ends now. You won't be judged by your title, accent, or skin color. You will be judged by your actions, your kindness, your service, your respect. To those who uphold these values, I see you. I'll invest in you. To those who don't, consider this your only warning. Let's build a new Rosecliff, not just luxury in design, but luxury in how we treat every person who walks through our doors. Elijah King, Executive Chairman, Rosecliff International. The letter was framed and placed in every hotel lobby the next day. Housekeepers paused to read it. Concierges nodded slowly. Even senior executives posted it on their office doors. It wasn't just a letter, it was a mission statement, and the beginning of a legacy far greater than any single incident. At Rosecliff Midtown, changes weren't just happening, they were visible. Gone were the stiff, impersonal greetings. Now, every guest was met with warmth, eye contact, and intention. Employees weren't just trained on how to fold napkins or carry luggage, they were trained on how to recognize unconscious bias, how to make every person feel like they belonged. Samuel, now in his supervisor's suit, walked the lobby with quiet authority. The staff respected him, not because of his title, but because he'd earned it. He checked in with new hires personally, offering guidance and support without ego. "You don't need to impress me," he'd often say. "Just treat people like they matter." Meanwhile, at corporate, the respect standard became mandatory across every Rosecliff property. Secret guest audits were introduced, not to catch staff making mistakes, but to reward those who quietly upheld the values Elijah had set. Elijah himself made surprise visits to different hotels, no entourage, no announcements. He'd check in like any other guest, sometimes under an alias, sometimes in plain sight. The staff never knew when he'd show, because he didn't want fear, he wanted culture, and it was working. Review scores skyrocketed, Staff turnover dropped. Guests began posting emotional stories of feeling truly seen, from immigrants to single parents, to black travelers who once avoided luxury spaces. Elijah's vision wasn't just changing hotels. It was reshaping hospitality itself. And while many CEOs would have held a press conference to boast, Elijah did what he always did. He stayed silent, let the results speak, and walked quietly through lobbies he once had to fight to be seen in. Only now, the difference was, everyone saw him. And even more importantly, they saw each other. Weeks later, Elijah finally agreed to one interview, just one. No flashy stage, no big network. He chose a quiet podcast called Leaders Who Listen, hosted by a former teacher turned journalist, Maya Brooks. They met in a small studio in Brooklyn. No suits, no cameras, just 2 chairs, 2 mics, and a conversation. So, Maya began gently. You fired an entire hotel staff, launched a company-wide reform, and refused to make a spectacle of it. Why now? Why this time? Elijah leaned forward, hands folded. Because I wasn't angry this time, he said. I was exhausted. Maya paused, surprised. You weren't angry? I've been angry before. It's easy to ignore angry. It lets people dismiss you. But exhaustion? That forces you to change something. I'm tired of walking into places I helped build and being treated like I don't belong. He looked at the mic, then added quietly, That hotel wasn't the first to deny me dignity. It was just the last I'd tolerate. Maya nodded, letting the silence stretch. Then she asked, What do you say to people who think you overreacted? Elijah smiled softly. Respect isn't earned only by degrees or wealth. It's owed to people, period. If it takes losing a job for someone to learn that, then maybe that's the price of the lesson. The interview ended not with applause but with reflection. And the next morning, Elijah's words were quoted everywhere. I wasn't angry. I was exhausted, and exhaustion doesn't ask anymore. It acts. It wasn't a roar. It was a whisper that shook the world. Because in a world full of loud leaders, Elijah proved that sometimes the most powerful voice is the one that stays calm and makes change anyway. 6 months later, the Rosecliff brand looked nothing like it once had. From New York to Tokyo, hotel lobbies now displayed the framed letter from Elijah King. Respect is not a luxury. It's a requirement. It had become more than a quote. It was the compass by which every employee navigated. Staff uniforms had changed, not in style, but in spirit. Name badges now carried a single line beneath each name, here to serve, here to see you. In schools, business classes studied Elijah's handling of the incident as a case in decisive leadership and ethical management. In corporate circles, his no-tolerance, full accountability model was being adopted by companies eager to fix their own broken cultures. Samuel had risen further, now Director of Guest Experience across all U.S. Rosecliff locations, mentoring others, quietly continuing the example Elijah had seen in him. And as for Elijah, he stayed behind the curtain, still walking into his hotels unannounced, still watching not for perfection, but for intention. He no longer needed to announce who he was. People knew, and more importantly, they acted better because they didn't know. One evening, at a Rosecliff in London, a young bellhop opened the door for Elijah with a genuine smile. Welcome, sir. We're honored to have you. Elijah paused, smiled back and said, That's how it should be. He stepped inside unnoticed by most, just another man in a fine suit. But this time, he didn't have to ask for room service. It arrived without delay, with warmth, and with respect. Not because he was Elijah King, the CEO, but because he was Elijah King, a human being. And that was the real legacy he'd built.